Dr. Stephen Hassan, nice to have you back here on Mea Culpa. Very good to see you, my friend. It's certainly been a while. And while it's been a while, it doesn't mean that things haven't been crazy, which of course, as you know, here on Mea Culpa, things go by way too quickly. So let me just jump straight into it. So Steve, despite mounting scandals and policy reversals, why does MAGA base continue to rally around Trump, especially considering many of the policies, for example, tariffs, harm them to the same extent that they harm Democrats?
It's a great question, and thank you for continuing to be the righteous person to speak truth to power, despite all the threats that are coming at all of us who are speaking truth to power. And, you know, my background for your listeners was that I got recruited into the Moonies cult in the 70s. I just want to frame it up for people so that they understand I got radicalized. So while I wasn't in MAGA, I was in the Moonies, and it was as extreme because I thought this fat Korean billionaire was the Messiah, and that we had to infiltrate the government and take it over. Democracy was satanic. We had to make a theocracy. And get this, Michael, I was at a meeting with Moon. He said, when we take power in America, we'll amend the Constitution and make it a capital offense for people who violate our rules. And I thought, great idea, father. I thought he was my true father. That was part of my brainwashing. So when I got deprogrammed after a near-fatal van crash, I wanted to understand how this nice Jewish boy from Queens, who grew up literally 1.3 miles from Donald Trump's childhood home. So I've known about Donald Trump my entire life as an asshole and as a braggart and a misogynist and a racist. You know, that's what led me to doing the cult of Trump. And so to answer your question, my frame is as a mental health professional who studied social psychology and brainwashing, mind control. So what I want to start by saying to answer your question is your question was too rational and logical.
Sorry.
And but you know, you're a lawyer and you're smart, and that's how we're supposed to act when we're adults. But what I'm trying to explain is when you really analyze the human species, we're very social and we're very emotional. And most of our thinking is done unconsciously by heuristics, and it requires extra special energy, glucose, to think rationally and analyze and look at data, look at facts, as lawyers are trained to do. This is not how most people function. Most people function because we have senses, we're socialized, and depending on who we're using for sources of information, we adapt. That's part of the brilliance of the human species, is we adapt to survive. So when you step back and look at it as a evolutionary psychology perspective, it makes perfect sense that when people are in an information bubble, largely orchestrated using our data by AI and social media platforms, people are following who they perceive to be legitimate influencers. And then lastly, before I'll stop talking, people need to understand we tend to believe what we want to believe. And nobody wants to believe they made a boo-boo. Like when I realized that Moon wasn't the Messiah and he wasn't God's agent and he was a liar and he was trustworthy, I was crying. I was so ashamed. I was so embarrassed. I was like, what have I been doing? Working 18 to 21 hours a day, 7 days a week for no money for a right-wing fascist. It was horrifying, but my family loved me, and there's life after mind control cult. And that's my big message, Michael, to people, is that we on the outside looking at MAGA need to see them as victims of a very intentional psychological warfare thing.
You know, Stephen, I want to ask you this because I've had you here on Mea Culpa before, and it's actually something that I wanted to ask you the last time, but I didn't. It came to me after the fact. Did you follow a female or a significant other into the Moonies? How did you end up getting trapped there? Because generally, what you find is it's like, what do they call those? Honey traps. Like a
Oh,
honey
you
trap ends up bringing you in, right? They sex you up like like you're right out of a 70s porn movie, and the next thing you know, you're starting to believe the bullshit around you because you don't want the sexing to stop.
So you actually nailed it. I confess, I was 19 years old. My hormones were raging. I loved women. I loved having sex. My girlfriend had abruptly dumped me, and I was approached by three women flirting with me at the cafeteria at Queens College, and they lied their faces off. They said they were students. They weren't. I asked if they were part of some religious group. Don't ask me why I asked, but I did. And they looked me straight in the eye and said, no, not at all. We're just part of a student activist group. But I wanna explain that there's a fundamental error in people's judgment when they look at why do people get into cults and brainwashing. It's called the fundamental attribution error in social psychology. I have a professor's hat on, my PhD. But they look at people and they overemphasize disposition or personality and underestimate social influence. So why did Steve get in the Moonies? He was weak. He was stupid. He was uneducated. He didn't have a good religion. He didn't
He was
have a
fucking
good
horny.
family.
He's fucking horny, plain and simple.
The truth is situational vulnerability, man.
Right. Let me be very clear. I've had the menage a trois in my past, but 3-on-1, no. And I'm going to tell you something too, right here on Mea Culpa. If I would have had that opportunity for a 3-on-1, and they were decent, they were good looking, and so on, shit, I'd go into the Moonies tomorrow.
I wasn't thinking, the 3-on-1. I was thinking I'll have very good odds to get with one of them because they were all really cute.
Dude, you were in the wrong cult. Let me
I'm
be
Jewish.
Clear about that.
I don't know.
Dude, you're in the wrong cult. Hey, let me ask you this then. There's obviously there's increasing defections that are going on that we all see every single day amongst Republicans and independents. Question I really want to ask you is what psychological mechanisms prevent many from fully breaking away from this MAGA movement?
That's a great question. And
listen, I aim to please.
I
like the three girls you met at Queens College.
So I've spent 49 years of my life wanting to explain to the public what I consider to be the #1 public health emergency, which is the rise of sophisticated psychological warfare methods through the digital media. So I want people to understand my influence continuum, that influence is from ethical to unethical, and look at the values of ethical: informed consent. Destructive cults lie. They withhold vital information. They distort information. Ethical influence respects your unique self and your critical thinking and your conscience. They demand obedience. Don't listen to your conscience. Do it or else we're going to come after you and threaten you. So I want people to understand this is not mystical. Look at behavior control, information, thought, and emotional control, and it creates a cult identity. But the key is it doesn't erase who you were. So if you were raised morally as I was, and I was taught not to lie as a kid in Flushing, Queens, when I was taught in the Moonies to lie to people to recruit them or make money or to do PR for them, there was real dissonance between the real me and the cult me. But the cult me won out because I was reprogrammed to believe that was Satan and demons. I was Jewish. I didn't believe in Satan or demons, but they made me. They inculcated that into me. So what I'm trying to explain is What doesn't work to help someone get out of the group is logic, facts, attacking the leader, the doctrine, or the policy. That activates the cult identity to get defensive and see you as the enemy. Stop trying to win arguments with people who are in MAGA. The best way to help them out is warmly, respectfully, with curiosity, asking them questions and being a good active listener and asking a follow-up question. So for MAGA people, what helps them get out isn't to say you're in a cult, you've been brainwashed, but you start with something like, do you believe there are Chinese communist brainwashing programs? Almost every MAGA will say yes. Then you can start asking questions like, what's your understanding of how brainwashing works? Because that's what helped me get deprogrammed, was learning about Chinese communism and learning the criteria by former military intelligence experts like Robert J. Lifton, who interviewed people. So talking about that, and even more importantly, talking about pimps and traffickers. Because if you think back, and why the Epstein files is so damaging, is that a lot of people got recruited into the cult of Trump, believing that he was going to drain the swamp and expose the pedophiles and the traffickers. That was the appeal. And QAnon people were on the streets trying to protect the children. The guy who went to Comet Pizza with the gun to liberate the children in the basement, only there wasn't a basement there. The psychology was to fight the traffickers. So, but labor and sex trafficking experts use my bite model to explain how pimps and traffickers recruit and indoctrinate pseudo identities. So if you're talking about something other than Trump directly, educating people on how to understand how people are being taken over and asking them to think back. What's your earliest memory of Donald Trump? What was your first impression?
Mine was very favorable.
Okay, so and I understand because you were recruited.
No. I'm talking about my first. My first was just prior to 1987, as his first book, The Art of the Deal, came out. Obviously, I was in college at the time in D.C., and I was taking the Trump shuttle back and forth from D.C. to LaGuardia Airport pretty much almost on a weekly basis. I had obviously, as a New Yorker, grown up seeing his name plastered basically everywhere, with the limousine, with all the models coming out of the car. I thought this guy was, one extremely, extremely cool guy. Right. And I thought his business acumen was off the chart. When I read The Art of the Deal for the very first time, I turned around and I said to myself, a lot of the shit that I do, I'm reading about in the book. It's almost like I could pull my name into this thing. Well, I ended up reading the book a second time because I thought maybe I was just imagining that, I was as entrepreneurial as I thought I was, which, by the way, I truly was. I mean, when I was in high school,
you were doing good.
Nothing for nothing.
Right.
When I was in high school, I was like the biggest ticket scalper in Long Island. I mean, I'm as a high schooler, I made like 80 grand off of the Michael Jackson concert alone. I had a DJ company that I had people working for me when I was in high school. I mean,
dude,
I was working my ass off out in Brooklyn. My family had a club, and I set up an ice cream parlor there, and I set up video games and so on. I was making a lot of money as a young kid.
Yeah, that's so impressive.
I saw myself as this type of an entrepreneur, and it was actually that entrepreneurial belief in myself that I related to in his book. That ultimately was the reason why I accepted the job when he offered it to me, instead of paying me the $100 grand that he owed me in legal fees.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Honestly, you're the first person I met who had a positive impression of Donald Trump. Maybe I'm not talking to the same population as you, but I just need to say this. I grew up in my father's hardware business, making $1 an hour, threading pipe and like fixing windows that were broken and stuff. Then I graduated to 250 an hour, and then I was a banquet waiter at the Holiday Inn in Hempstead. So different world than you, my friend. But in any case, the point is, when I've asked people to think back, they usually say The Apprentice. And I say, what was your first gut reaction when you saw him? And people typically, this is what they're saying to me. Maybe it's because I'm biased and they knew it, but they would say, I thought he was so arrogant, or I thought he was a bully.
Yeah, well.
It was not a positive reflection. So when I try to ask people to think back to how did they get to where they are now, you know, and to give them some encouragement to reality tests, because people get involved based on information and experiences, etc. But life gives us new information and new experiences and meeting new people and hearing Mea Culpa. And you know, I was on with Lev Parnas the other day, and it's like hearing another story of someone who got lured in to the orbit.
But you know who hasn't gotten lured in? The folks, for example, from the UK and from Australia and other countries where media coverage has labeled Trump chaotic and unfit for office. My question to you is, why do loyalists dismiss this global critique while outsiders see it as damning?
So in the BITE model, information control is critical. And I can tell you, as an indoctrinated Moonie, and I've been helping people in hundreds, if not thousands of other cults, I was taught to do a technique called thought stopping, that when some criticism against the leader or against the divine principle, the group, I would immediately start to chant in my head. Different cults have different techniques to block the negative thoughts. With MAGA, they label it fake news, fake news, fake news. So they block it from thinking, why did they say this? What is the evidence? Let me evaluate it for myself. They just paint it. And this is another feature of mind control, is under the T of the BITE model, thought control, is that ideologies in mind control cults are very simplistic. They're black and white, us versus them, good versus evil. Very simple. Us versus them. Them are evil. We're the good. We're doing God's will. Everyone else is Satan. And so there are mechanisms inside the cult identity that to stay grounded or to stay centered or to stay loyal. But then there's also the fear, not just phobias, which are irrational fears, but actual fears that they're going to come after you and harass you or harass your family. This is a major technique Chinese communism uses, by the way, with expatriates, Chinese people around the world, is they say, if you say anything against, the party or against, Chairman Xi, your family in China are going to suffer. Do you really want to cause your family to? So they're using fear tactics to manipulate and control. But in the end, people resent it. In the end, when for example, I interviewed David Weissman when I wrote The Cult of Trump, who was a MAGA troll, self-professed MAGA troll, who interacted with Sarah Silverman. He was going after her. She was talking about shooters, with rifles. And she said, "Oh, you're a veteran? Thank you for your service. Tell me, what are your ideas for stopping school shootings?" And he was blown away that a celebrity would even acknowledge his existence. But then he was like, what would I do to solve school
True.
shootings.
True.
And it made him think, and it made him exit the cult of Trump, because all of his buddies saw how he was reacting positively with Sarah Silverman, and they branded him a traitor. You traitor! How could you possibly like Sarah Silverman?
I get that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but talking about people like that, let's just take a look at it as an example. And I can name 30, but I think just for, for simplicity and for expeditiousness, I want to just refer to figures like Kash Patel, like Pam Bondi, like Ted Cruz. These three, as an example, recently have been observed echoing Trump's rhetoric. Now, I'm curious, how does this mimicry serve to reinforce group cohesion within this MAGA movement? Because every single one of them, and they're just three, I could go on and name another 30, from MAGA Mike Johnson all the way to, what's his name, John Kennedy, to RFK Jr., you name it. They're all doing the same thing. Every day, every morning, what we used to do in 2015, 2016 during the campaign, and I know they still do it, they put out what's called talking points memo. And they send it to all of their enablers, their sycophants, all of their surrogates, so that every single one of us are on point to say the same thing. And you know what? It's reinforcement upon reinforcement upon reinforcement of the same usage of the same word, to the point that it becomes ingrained in your head. So when you hear Kash Patel say something, oh yeah, I heard Pam Bondi say that, I heard Ted Cruz say that, I heard MAGA Mike Johnson say it, I heard Besson say it, I heard Lutnick say it, I've heard them all say it. It's got to be true.
So this is a very important point. You're talking about programming repeated over and over and over again, indoctrination, and it's stereotypical of being in a mind control cult. And it's the opposite of what the Democrats have been doing, where they're bickering amongst themselves and there's no unified messaging that's coherent and simple to understand and emotionally provocative and inviting, with a positive vision. The positive vision is also really lacking in the opponents. It's one thing to oppose. It's another thing to motivate people to have a future, to have a good future.
Losing someone close really makes you think about the future. I've seen friends and family struggle with the unexpected hits, and the last thing you want is for your loved ones to worry about bills, the mortgage, or tuition on top of their grief. That's why I looked into life insurance and why I went through Ethos. Getting coverage through Ethos was shockingly easy. It's 100% online, no medical exam required. You just answer a few health questions. And in fact, I got an instant rate in as little as 10 minutes and same-day coverage without ever leaving my house. I mean, that's faster than waiting for a politician to get anything done. Life insurance isn't just about death. It's about making sure your family can keep their home, send the kids to college, and maintain their lifestyle if something, God forbid, happens to you. And with Ethos, it's actually affordable. Some policies, they're as low as $2 a day, billed monthly with up to $3 million in coverage. They're disrupting the old, confusing way of doing life insurance. And you know what? It shows. It shows, with over 3 million families having trusted Ethos. And they're rated, by the way, 4.8 out of 5 stars on Trustpilot. So protect your family with life insurance from Ethos. Get your free quote at ethos.com/Cohen. That's ethos.com/Cohen. Fast, simple, reliable, and honestly, a little peace of mind goes a long way, even in my world.
But let me just state again, my take on this phenomenon is it's a dissociative disorder. There's a cult identity and their real self, and there's dissonance between their real self and their cult self. And who knows them best? Family, friends, children. And I remember talking with you, Michael, about how your dad was a Holocaust survivor, how your wife hated Trump and didn't want you to work for Trump, right? Am I remembering correctly?
Yep. Yep.
So for me, what I'm trying to say publicly is if we really want to stop this evil, and I'm labeling it evil because it really is anti-life, it's anti-growth, it's anti-freedom, it's control, it's abuse, exploitation. We need to educate everybody on how to interact with family and friends who are in MAGA. And it isn't by yelling at them or cutting off contact or blocking them. It's engagement, warm engagement, because I'm telling you, there are so many fissures now. Since he's taken the office again, there's so many fissures, but each person has their own. Think of a combination lock.
Mm-hmm.
But the family who knows the person, the wife, the father, the kids, they need to understand you can ethically influence your loved one by asking warm questions and helping the person to reality test. Because in the end, you want your kids to approve of you. You want your wife to approve of you. You want your folks to approve of you. You don't want to just ignore them or make them feel like you don't care what they think. So the issue is really methodological and how to warmly, and a big problem with my clients that contact me and ask me for advice is what I call self-affect regulation, how to not get triggered and get so angry you want to strangle a person or you want to just, run out the door screaming.
So
it's how to engage, knowing that there's the real him is still in there and you can help him and he will exit. And you did exit, and you exit in a very powerful way.
Well, I exited simply because I got thrown into prison and pushed under a bus by a guy who I'm still to this day shocked, amazed, confused as to why. But I want to touch on something here, and I want my listeners to understand this. MAGA is not the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. MAGA is approximately 38-40% of the Republican Party. Now, I want to be clear. That's an enormous number of people, but it's not the Republican Party. I'll go one step further. MAGA is also not the independents. It's certainly not the Democrats. So you have approximately 60+% of the country that do not ascribe to this MAGA cult ideology. So what does Trump end up doing? He ends up not wanting to hear from that other 60+%, only from his diehard loyalists. And he's even made comments as recently as the other day suggesting that he may target journalists over what he alleged to be, and I quote, hate speech. Now, first question I want to ask you, how does this stance challenge traditional interpretations of the First Amendment? Because this is simply an act within which to silence critics, thereby only having your positive message issued to the world.
Right. So first of all, my take, and it's not scientific, is that it's less than 60. I'd say at least 70% are not loyal or believe that Trump is a great guy or doing God's will or whatever. But you're bringing up freedom of speech, which is what has been the one of the number one, that and gun rights, things of the conservative movement. And we're, in my opinion, we're not messaging enough on this topic of how important it is to allow other people to share opinions that are different than yours. And the key thing here is reminding people of what they used to believe and now what he's saying, but asking them, not telling them, but asking them, how does that make you feel? That you have to think twice of what you're going to say because they may come after you, versus what you used to preach, which is people should say and have the freedom to say what they want to say. And,
well, you didn't
wait.
have the right to say, when you were a Moonie, you certainly did not have the right to criticize the Reverend Sung Young Moon, right? And if you
I
did,
didn't have a negative thought in 2.5 years until my deprogramming.
Even if you did, you never would have expounded upon it. You wouldn't have talked about it for fear, one, of being thrown out, but two, it would be considered, again in quotes, hate speech, which would basically create some sort of a serious problem for you. And the reason that I bring that up with Moon and with to me, what they are doing, what Pam Bondi, our Attorney General's assertion that hate speech incites violence, it should be charged criminally, and so on. That behavior, that ideology, to me, aligns with authoritarian tendencies.
Of course, and Trump would go to jail immediately because he's been spewing more hate than anything. Just listen to what he said when after the Kirk murder. The first thing he said was blame all of his non-believers as the cause of the murder, not one sick person who did this violent act. So, but again, for me, what I really want to focus on is giving people encouragement and tools for how to proceed in the midst of all of this authoritarian fascist, because this is the playbook, is to intimidate, to make influencers afraid, to self-censor. I have to tell you quickly, a friend of mine, a new friend of mine who is following Arnold Schwarzenegger, just shared a little video clip of him at USC. And I had told him that I met Arnold in 1976 when I was first whistleblowing against the Moonies. I was doing the Barry Farber talk show. Arnold was promoting Pumping Iron just before my segment. He comes out of the studio with this beautiful blonde, and he was wearing a white sweater. I'll never forget it. I thought he had a body armor from the museum underneath. I'd never met a bodybuilder. And he heard that I was an ex-Moonie, getting out of a cult. He said, "Can I stay and talk with you for the segment?" And he did. And he was talking about the Nazis. And I've heard him since talking about the Nazis. I know the Nazis. I know the playbook. This is really bad. But when I'm watching this clip that was from the last few days, he's skirting around the key issues and trying to say Charlie Kirk was a great husband and a great patriot. And I'm like, oh, darn, Arnold, man, I just lost respect for you, dude. You used to be able to say, he said when Putin and he met in Alaska, he said, what a wet noodle Trump was, how disappointed he was. I was like, okay, that's wet noodle. But anyway, now it's just like, we have to speak truth to power. And
so what do you think Arnold's scared about? Look, Arnold has basically done it all, from coming out of nowhere. And by the way, the Nazi scenarios come back to his family, who were Nazis in Austria, and so on. Now,
he outed himself.
He did, and he denounced it, but he has run the entire gamut of the American dream. Literally came here, bodybuilder, big shit, right? No, big shit is right, because he ends up becoming Mr. Olympia. From there, he's got a hell of a presence on camera.
Conan the Barbarian,
Conan the Barbarian. He was also, of course, in all of the, a slew
Governor.
of different, a slew of the Terminators and
Right.
slew, and then he became a director and a writer, and then he became governor of California, marries a Kennedy. I mean, you're talking about legitimately as good an American dream as anybody could sort of write.
Exactly. Why
So
I'm
what the
disappointed.
flying fuck is he worried about right now by coming out and saying, listen, the political assassination of anyone, take Charlie Kirk's name out of the entire, whether it's Melissa Hortman, take her name out of the whole thing, whether it was the attack on Pelosi with a hammer, right? Paul Pelosi, take him out of the equation. Take all of the two-time attempt to assassinate Trump. Take him out of the equation. Political assassination is wrong, plain and simple. And we should have learned that many years ago, whether it was John F. Kennedy or Robert F. Kennedy. We should have learned these lessons a long time ago, but they don't. They don't learn these lessons. In fact, why not just turn around and say a political assassination is detrimental to our democratic republic? Plain and simple. I didn't ascribe to basically anything that Charlie Kirk had to say. Does that mean I wanted to see him assassinated? Absolutely not.
I agree with you.
But as I wrote in my Substack the other day, Charlie Kirk will not become a martyr. He's no Martin Luther King. He's no Nelson Mandela. He's no
They're trying to make him that. They
could try all they want. Mark my words. Mark my words. A week to 10 days after this episode airs, Charlie Kirk won't even be in the news anymore. Yeah, they'll cite him every now and then in a rally speech or in something like that. But this Charlie Kirk sort of fascination will not continue to exist, because in America, we wake up every single day, we go to sleep every single day with a new chaos that is created by this administration. This administration's continuous chaos will ultimately chaos Kirk right out of the conversation.
So I want to just add, I agree with you 1,000%. And just to finish the frame around Arnold, he could have just left it with the message that political assassination. He didn't have to, do all of that other stuff. So Arnold, if you or your family's listening, let's talk, buddy, because we need to stay centered in our values. We need to stay true to our integrity. For me, looking in the mirror before I go to sleep, I want to feel good about what I did that day. I don't want to have anything like I should have did this or I didn't do that right or whatever. I want to have a clear conscience and keep plugging the way I want to do. But here's what I want to add to this, because you were saying it's going to be over in 10 or 20 days. Frickin' Vance doing Charlie Kirk's podcast.
Yeah.
That was because I think
unprecedented.
When Trump was threatening Musk that they were going to cut all of the space stuff and everything, I'm going, oh, so Thiel and Musk are now going to take Trump out of the equation, put Vance in because Vance is their person, and get rid of Trump. And who knows what Trump's health is. But I've been seeing a real decline in his health, psychologically as well as physically. But I'm very worried about Vance being this new face of the fascism.
Okay, so let me stop you for 2 seconds there. 2 different points. I'm going to start first with Trump.
Please.
As somebody who knows him better than any human being should know another human being, physical decline, he's, aged since I spent as much time with him as I did. But then again, he's 79 years old, right? I've aged too since I started working. My hair was jet black. Now it's salt and pepper at best.
Yep.
As it relates to mental, no. There's no dementia going on here. He's
really?
I'm telling you firsthand, and I'm telling it to you firsthand, there is no dementia.
Okay.
This is all part of the Trump playbook. Mark my words on it. And as to Shady Vance, let me be very clear about something too. He's no
Please.
face of this Turning Point USA. He will never be the face. He is one of the most despised people that are out there, including in his own party. MAGA looks at him as the couch fucking jerk off that he is. He is not the one who will take the reins.
Music to my ears, Mr.
Charlie
Cohen.
Kirk is very similar in one respect to Donald Trump. He had an ability to be like Moon. He had the ability to be a cult leader, because that's really what Charlie Kirk was. Now, again, you could disagree. He managed to tap into something inside the hearts of predominantly these young, disenfranchised males that were questioning their own masculinity. How can I not be number one? How could a female be number one? How could a black female be number one? I'm a white male. I'm the dominance, right? I'm the alpha. Well, that's what he tapped into. Whether you believe that shit or you disagree doesn't make a difference. He was able to build something over a 13-year period that was enormous. J.D. Vance couldn't build a hemorrhoid if he tried. All right? I'm telling you right off the bat, he is not going to be, thank you, he is not going to be the face of Turning Point USA, no matter how many times they put him on the podcast. It makes no difference. But I want to continue on a different thought here.
Okay.
Because, again, in order to only have your message out there, right? And it's very different than a cult, which is much more contained, right? Whether it was Moon, whether it was Jones, whether it was Koresh. These are all very self-contained groups. Here, we're not talking about self-contained. We're talking about the entire country, 360 plus million people. So what do they do in order to prevent somebody else's message from coming out? They make these threats continuously. Just the other day, on the lawn of the White House, Trump threatened Jonathan Karl of ABC News, which to me did nothing more than highlight this growing hostility towards the press, something we see very regularly with people like Vladimir Putin and his state-run media. Tell me if you would, how does this behavior affect the public's trust in media institutions?
Oh, this is one of the biggest problems is information, and who can we trust to give us information that's reliable, that's fact-based, that, you know, will stand up to scrutiny, is going to be one of the most important things, especially in this age of AI generated deep fakes and you know, quantum computing, you know, mass scale manipulation. But I want to say something really important, Michael. When the thesis of the cult of Trump is that there are actual authoritarian cults bringing their base to follow Trump. And I want to point in particular to 30 to 40 million Americans who are in these groups called New Apostolic Reformation megachurches and churches, and how they're different from evangelical Christians is they're self-professed apostles or prophets who claim to speak to God themselves, claim that they can cast out demons and do faith healings. And these are the people who have their base believing that they're spiritual warriors against Satan and the Democrats. And these are the people who said, God told me Donald Trump won the 2020 election, and they won't believe anything but their prophet or their apostle.
This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Now look, you and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Look, I'm so excited to see Saquon Barkley run the ball this weekend, and I'm thinking that he could even have more than one rushing touchdown. Prize Picks is simple to play. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. And if you get your picks right, you could cash in. Prize Picks is also the best way to get action on sports in more than 40 plus states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Prize Picks is the best way to win cash this football season. I mean, which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your takes into cash all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to win cash while watching sports. So join millions of users and sign up today. Download the app today and use code Cohen to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code Cohen, Cohen, to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right.
So there are these spheres of influence within the base, but more and more Christians are starting to speak out, quoting Jesus, reaching out to people in these groups, questioning, hey, didn't the Bible say beware of false prophets? Doesn't the Bible talk about, not following people for money or power or politics, the ones who want to take over the government? So I want to, and I have done a bunch of interviews with people who are Christians, who know the Bible and have written against Christian nationalism and New Apostolic Reformation. And we should be doing strategic interventions with all of these subcults, because I believe we could get a third at least away in the coming months if we did it together strategically and intelligently.
Yeah, I'm wondering then, how come nobody then is following me? As you can see here,
I
right?
saw that. I laughed.
Yeah,
I was
is
like,
that
who made that?
Why you laughing? Nobody made it. I was walking down the street and I just phoenixed myself. Look,
Yeah.
so and and while Trump is engaging, listen, my mom used to tell me I could walk on water, right? Like
all Jewish
mothers.
Moms.
Sure. I'm sure
Thing.
Jesus and Mary turned around and said that to Jesus too. Of course you're God's son. Of course you are. Meanwhile, in Trump's exchange, because it wasn't just with Jonathan Karl, which got extremely ugly, there was also an Australian journalist by the name, I think it was John Lyons. I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that's who it was, an Australian journalist. Trump accused him. He asked a very fair question. Let me be very clear. They will never let me, right? And I've put in requests for credentials. They will never let me on that ground to ask questions, because I'm not going to pull back like everybody else is doing. This guy, John Lyons, turns around and asks a very poignant question. Trump did not like it. And so Trump then goes on and accuses him of hurting Australia. Literally, that this one freaking journalist, right, who somehow matters from the Australian Advisor, whatever the hell it's called, he himself, solely by asking a question, has now hurt Australia. And by the way, to really stick the knife in the back, Trump tells him, oh, by the way, and your leader, not the president, right, your leader is going to be here very, very shortly, within a couple of weeks. And I'm going to tell him exactly what you did and how badly you hurt Australia. Imagine you could ask a question and now you fucked up the whole country of Australia. Doctor, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What does this reveal about Trump's perception of dissent and accountability?
He's trying to do information control and emotional control to make people fall in line. But you're bringing up a point that I want to make back to when Trump declared that Washington, D.C. was a cesspool of criminality, even though the statistics have gone down, etc. The media has never, I've not heard a single responsible media person say, oh, Trump's doing propaganda for Putin and Xi to show their people who always idolized America and wanted to get out of those dictatorships and come here, that this was messaging that he was doing to help them. And I listened to you talking about Australia. he's sending a message to try to, activate the base in Australia for the right wing there, as Musk and other people are doing that in Europe right now to amplify the fascists. It's like there's a coordinated authoritarian push happening. The fossil fuel corporations and countries are deeply involved. The crypto thing is a whole nother element to this grift, and to take down the dollar, the American economy, American security. This is all part of a strategic psychological warfare thing. And unfortunately, people are still walking around clueless that this is psychological warfare. We should be inoculating our people, teaching them the techniques so it doesn't influence them, teaching them how to message, and really have a vision where we can save our freedoms, our human rights.
So look, guaranteed in every cult, all of the followers believe that the cult leader is a god. Correct?
No, there's a lot of cults that are not religious, but I'll hold up one of my graphics that typically most people are what I call fringe members. They're not on the inside. They have no clue what is actually being discussed on the inside. And there really are, and some people are kept in the dark from what's happening on the other side of the pyramid, etc.
Well, but let me then just talk about MAGA.
Not all cults are religious.
Okay, let's talk about MAGA for a quick second, because on a daily basis, we all hear Trump make claims that he and he alone can do everything. And he's the only one. He could end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours because both sides, right? Because both sides are incapable of talking to one another because they hate each other so much. But he and he alone could end the war in 24 hours. That was a big campaign promise. That he and he alone could end the war in Israel and with Hamas. That he and he alone can get back all of the hostages, even before he took office, right? He can do all of this, that he and he alone have now ended 7 wars throughout the world, that he and he alone has now created, right? That he has created economic wealth for this country never seen before, all right? Whereby we are taking in his statements, more than $17 trillion based upon tariffs. It's funny because Scott Bessent has turned around and made the claim that we've taken in a couple hundred million or maybe even a few billion, but certainly a far cry from 17 trillion, which is approximately half of our national debt. Question I really want to ask you is, how does this delusion of omnipotence appeal to followers' need for certainty and for hero worship? See, I believe that many of these MAGAs, most of them are doing it for their own financial gain. There's all financial gain into all of them, whether it's like the Sean Hannitys, whether it's the Jesse Waters or the Brian Kilmeades. This is for them. This is their job. They need to stroke the ass of their listeners and so on. So they do it for their own selfish reasons. But I've seen plenty of people around him who literally think that Trump walks on water and that nothing he does, even if they know that it's wrong, it's not right, doesn't make a difference. If Trump did it, it's okay by me.
Yeah, that's part of the indoctrination. So I want to just quickly say that Erich Fromm, social psychologist, analyzed Adolf Hitler's personality and came up with a framework called malignant narcissism, which is all the narcissism things like grandiosity, need for attention, sense of entitlement, lack of empathy, all of those, plus thinking they're above the law, pathological lying, paranoid, sadistic. There's a whole list, and I compare Trump with Jim Jones and Moon and Hubbard in chapter 3 of the book. But I want to say that first and foremost. And people who are malignant narcissists are very persuasive because they have confidence and certainty in a level that the average person goes, wow, they must really know what they're talking about to be that confident, because I'm not that confident about anything, because they're projecting their normalcy to a person who's not normal. This guy is sick. He has a serious psychopathology. Then I want to add, he was raised in the cult of Norman Vincent Peale. This is another element of my book. And what Norman Vincent Peale said, you fake it till you make it. You believe it 100%. If you have a doubt, it's a sin. So you have to believe. And people have been saying, oh, he's Teflon and nothing bothers him, because he's been trained to do thought stopping and to just say whatever comes out of his mouth and believe it 100%. And he surrounds himself with enablers who are loyalists now, which is why he's doing so much damage so quickly, enforcing the Heritage Foundation Project 2025, which is related to the cult of Opus Dei. That's in the cult of Trump. That's another major Catholic cult that people need to learn about. And there's a lot of information by former members. But the other thing I want to say is that because I've studied developmental psychology as a mental health professional, we grow up as from childhood to adulthood. But when you have a cult identity that's a clone of someone else, you go down developmentally. So, and in fact, some of these cults explicitly say, relate to the leader like a child. He's your father figure. And on an emotional level, people are not thinking as adults. And they want to believe that that things are going to work out okay. There's also a sunk cost fallacy is a very well-known phenomenon where if you keep investing energy and time and behavior in a certain direction, you'll keep doing it, even if you intellectually realize it's not going to bring the results you want, which would be the rational thing to stop. But if you understand this is a thing with human beings and we have to correct for these biases, but all of this is not mystical. You can really understand it if you take the time to learn psychology. And people need to take care of themselves because I was just talking with you before we started. I was part of a forensic think tank presentation on secondary traumatic stress and how when you're training forensic trainees, you have to take into account if they're looking at grisly videos, it's going to traumatize the forensic trainee because you have to get calluses to, exposure to trauma. Well, how do you brainwash a large population? You overload them. You stimulate so much fear and anxiety and sleeplessness. You want them on their phones all night long so they're not sleeping well. That's another part of destructive mind control. And it makes it easier to implant ideas in your head. And lastly, what we now know through neuroscience is if you hear a lie over and over and over again, the brain starts acting like it's true.
Well, that's
even though intellectually it's not, the brain starts, because we evolved as a species. We're not used to being in a digital, environment.
That's the old Stalin line, right? The more you repeat the lie, the more the lie becomes the truth.
And Hitler did too.
Exactly. Well, Dr. Hassan, thank you for making us all smarter. I'm going to have you back because sadly, I don't see this thing coming to an end any day soon. In fact, I see Trump sadly getting stronger, believing that not the party, Trump. And that, my friends, is the danger that we have to live with.
Well, thank you for having me on. Continued success. I will say that my podcast, we just did a name change to Cults Culture and Coercion, and it's on the Midas Touch Network as well.
Well, there you go. 500 million downloads so far on Mea Culpa, believe it or not. So I wish you the same success, my brother.
Thank you.